December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto watches intelligence reports flood his flagship's communication room. 6 American carriers exist in the Pacific. His staff calculates Japan needs 18 months, maybe 2 years, to achieve decisive victory before American industrial capacity awakens. They have made precise calculations, studied American shipyard capacity, analyzed construction timelines from previous naval building programs. What they haven't calculated is the impossible, that within 42 months, America will launch not 6, not 12, but 24 identical fleet carriers from shipyards that didn't exist when the war began. The Essex-Class program would prove that Japanese admirals had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of their enemy. They had attacked a nation, but awakened a factory. January 15, 1942. Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters, Tokyo. Admiral Osami Nagano, Chief of the Naval General Staff, convened his planning staff in the fortified basement of the Navy Ministry Building. 6 weeks after Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces controlled the Western Pacific. American carrier strength stood at 3 operational fleet carriers in the Pacific: USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, USS Saratoga. The intelligence section, led by Captain Kanji Ogawa, presented their assessment. According to naval attaché reports from Washington gathered before the war, American shipbuilding capacity could produce approximately 1 fleet carrier every 18 to 24 months using traditional construction methods. The United States had 7 carriers total before Pearl Harbor. Simple mathematics suggested the Americans might add 3, perhaps 4 carriers by late 1943. Japanese naval planners had also considered American shipyard infrastructure. In 1941, the United States possessed 4 shipyards capable of constructing fleet carriers: Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, New York Naval Shipyard in Brooklyn, Norfolk Naval Shipyard in Virginia, and Fore River Shipyard in Massachusetts. The Japanese assumed, logically, that American carrier production would be constrained by these existing facilities. What Japanese intelligence had failed to grasp was the American approach to industrial mobilization. While they calculated based on existing infrastructure, the United States was preparing to build the infrastructure itself. February 3, 1942. Newport News Shipbuilding, Virginia. The keel of USS Essex CV-9 had been laid on April 28, 1941, 7 months before Pearl Harbor. Shipyard supervisor William Garrett oversaw 8,000 workers operating in 3 shifts, 24 hours daily. The shipyard had expanded dramatically, adding fabrication shops, assembly buildings, and worker housing. But Essex was only the beginning. At Norfolk Naval Shipyard, USS Yorktown CV-10, named for the carrier lost at Midway, was already under construction, her keel laid August 1, 1941. At Bethlehem Steel's Fore River Shipyard in Quincy, Massachusetts, USS Intrepid CV-11 was taking shape, keel laid December 1, 1941. The construction pace would have seemed impossible by pre-war standards. Traditional carrier construction involved sequential processes: hull construction, followed by propulsion installation, then superstructure, then combat systems. American shipyards were implementing revolutionary prefabrication techniques. Naval architect Thomas Henderson, working for the Bureau of Ships, had developed modular construction methods documented in Navy Department records. Rather than building carriers sequentially, major sections were constructed simultaneously in different parts of the shipyard, then assembled. Engine rooms were built as complete units in specialized shops, then lifted into place. Flight deck sections were fabricated in large panels rather than constructed plate by plate. The workforce expanded exponentially. Newport News Shipbuilding employed 8,000 workers in January 1942. By December 1942, that number reached 31,000. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. Rosie the Riveter wasn't propaganda. She was producing the ships that would cross the Pacific. Training programs compressed years of apprenticeship into months of intensive instruction. Welding schools operated continuously. The American Welding Society coordinated with the Navy to standardize techniques and train instructors who could train others. By mid-1942, shipyards were training 500 new welders monthly. Material supply chains stretched across the continent. Steel mills in Pennsylvania and Ohio prioritized carrier plate production. Turbine manufacturers in New York delivered propulsion systems on accelerated schedules. Radio manufacturers in New Jersey supplied communication equipment. The entire industrial infrastructure bent toward a single purpose: producing carriers faster than any nation had thought possible. Japanese intelligence officers monitoring American publications noted shipyard expansion but dismissed the implications. Their February 1942 assessment, captured after the war, concluded, "American publicity regarding warship production appears exaggerated for morale purposes. Physical constraints of specialized construction make claimed production schedules impossible." They were analyzing American capability through the lens of Japanese experience, assuming American limitations mirrored their own. It was a fatal error that would become apparent within 18 months. May 31st, 1943, 12:47 hours. USS Essex cleared Hampton Roads, Virginia, beginning her journey to the Pacific. She had been commissioned December 31st, 1942, just 20 months after her keel was laid. For a ship of her size and complexity, 888 feet long, displacing 27,100 tons, capable of carrying 90 aircraft, this construction timeline shattered every previous record. Admiral Nagano received the intelligence report in Tokyo on June 15, 1943. His staff had confirmed USS Essex was operational and heading toward Pearl Harbor. But what followed in the intelligence summary caused unprecedented concern. USS Yorktown CV-10 had been commissioned April 15, 1943. USS Intrepid would commission in August. USS Hornet CV-12 was completing sea trials. USS Franklin CV-13 was fitting out. Captain Ogawa's revised assessment acknowledged growing alarm. American carrier construction has exceeded all projections. 5 new Essex-Class carriers will be operational by October 1943. Intelligence indicates additional hulls under construction, though exact numbers remain unclear. The exact numbers were devastating. At Newport News Shipbuilding, 3 more Essex-Class hulls were under construction simultaneously. At New York Naval Shipyard, 2 carriers were being built in parallel. At Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, which had expanded specifically for carrier construction, 2 more hulls were taking shape. At Norfolk, Bethlehem Steel's Fore River, and even at Bethlehem Steel's Quincy Yard, the assembly lines continued. Japanese naval intelligence had been tracking American shipyard activity through neutral observers, published construction contracts, and photographic reconnaissance when possible. By July 1943, their revised count identified 14 Essex-Class carriers, either completed, fitting out, or under construction. The number seemed impossible. Commander Toshikazu Omai, serving in the Naval General Staff's Planning Section, drafted a memorandum that was discovered in post-war archives. American construction capacity has been fundamentally underestimated. Their ability to build multiple fleet carriers simultaneously across numerous shipyards indicates industrial mobilization beyond our comprehension. Request immediate strategic reassessment of timeline to achieve decisive naval victory. The strategic implications were catastrophic. Japanese planning had assumed a window of opportunity, 18 to 24 months, during which their 6 fleet carriers and 4 light carriers would maintain superiority, while American construction slowly replaced Pearl Harbor losses. That window was slamming shut. December 18, 1944, 0730 hours. The snow-covered hedgerows outside Bastogne, Belgium, held Corporal James Hendricks and Private First Class Donald Krause in positions they'd occupied since before dawn. Both men, members of Company E, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, had been hastily deployed to block German armored columns driving toward the critical road junction at Bastogne. The previous 3 days had transformed from routine occupation duty into desperate defensive operations. German forces, launching Operation Wacht am Rhein, what Americans would call the Battle of the Bulge, had achieved complete tactical surprise. Panzer columns had broken through thinly held American lines, and now thousands of German tanks and infantry were driving westward through the Ardennes forest toward the Meuse River. Hendricks adjusted his position behind the snow-covered hedgerow, the M9A1 launcher resting across a hastily constructed firing position of frozen earth and logs. Beside him, Krause checked their ammunition supply. 4 M6A3 rockets, each carefully protected from moisture in their canvas carriers. The temperature hovered near 20 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that both men worried about equipment performance despite assurances during training that the weapons functioned in extreme conditions. Through the morning fog, they heard the unmistakable sound of approaching armor, the distinctive rumble of German tank engines and the metallic clatter on tracks on frozen ground. Radio reports from forward observation posts had warned of a panzer column moving along the road from the direction of Longvilly, approximately 3 kilometers to the east. At 0743 hours, the first German tank emerged from the fog bank. Hendricks, peering through frozen binoculars, identified it as a Panzer IV Aus FH, the most common German medium tank they'd encountered in training films. The tank advanced at approximately 15 kilometers per hour, accompanied by Panzer Grenadiers moving in tactical formation on both flanks, approximately 20 soldiers visible through the fog and snow. The German infantry maintained what their doctrine called proper escort distance, scanning the hedgerows and buildings approximately 75 to 100 meters ahead of the tank. Their training had taught them that American bazooka teams needed to close to within 50 meters for effective penetration, giving alert infantry sufficient time to suppress or eliminate the threat before tanks enter danger range. Lieutenant Thomas Winters, commanding the platoon's defensive sector from a position 30 meters to Hendricks's left, had issued specific instructions during the pre-dawn briefing. "Let them close to 150 yards," he'd said. "The Germans don't know what we're carrying. They think they're safe at that range. We'll show them different." The Panzer IV continued its advance, the commander visible in the open cupola scanning ahead with binoculars. The tank's 75mm KWK 40 gun traversed slowly left and right, covering potential threat positions. Additional German infantry had emerged from the fog behind the first tank, and now Hendricks could see a second Panzer IV approximately 100 meters behind the lead vehicle. At 0747 hours, the lead tank reached the position Winters had designated as the firing point, a distinctive burned-out farm truck 150 yards from Hendricks's position. Winters raised his arm, the prearranged signal to fire. Hendricks settled the launcher on his shoulder, sighting through the simple iron sights at the Panzer IV's hull. At this angle, the tank presented its frontal armor directly toward his position, 80 millimeters of steel plate that German crews had been assured would defeat American rocket launchers at this range. "Loaded," Krause whispered, having inserted the M6A3 rocket and connected the electrical wire. He tapped Hendricks's helmet twice, the signal that the weapon was ready to fire. Hendricks exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger grip. The magneto snapped, sending electrical current to the rocket's igniter. The M6A3 erupted from the launcher with a whoosh of flame and smoke, the backblast throwing snow and debris backward in a dramatic plume. The rocket covered 150 yards to target in approximately 1 second, leaving a thin smoke trail through the cold air. The German tank commander had perhaps half a second to register the incoming threat before the M6A3 impacted the Panzer IV's upper glacis plate slightly left of center. The shaped charge detonated on contact, the Monroe effect transforming the copper cone liner into a superheated jet of metal particles that penetrated the 80mm armor plate as if it were cardboard. The hypersonic metal jet continued through the fighting compartment at 25,000 feet per second, instantly killing the driver and hull gunner. Spalling, fragments of armor blown from the interior surface of the penetrated plate, ricocheted through the crew compartment like shrapnel. The jet's thermal effect ignited stored ammunition within seconds. The Panzer IV erupted in a catastrophic internal explosion, the turret lifting slightly before settling back onto the burning hull. The entire sequence from rocket launch to destruction took less than 3 seconds. The German infantry, who had been advancing confidently under the protection of what they believed was invulnerable frontal armor, froze in shock. Their doctrine had no provisions for American anti-tank weapons engaging successfully at this range. The 2nd Panzer IV commander, witnessing the lead tank's destruction from 100 meters behind the lead vehicle, immediately reversed his tank while traversing the turret to search for the threat. German infantry began suppressing Hendrix's position with rifle and machine gun fire, but the bazooka team had already displaced to a secondary position 20 meters to the right, a tactic emphasized repeatedly during training. From their new position, Hendrix and Krauss engaged the reversing Panzer IV at approximately 175 yards. The 2nd M6A3 rocket struck the tank's right side as it turned, penetrating the 30mm side armor and causing another catastrophic kill. The German infantry, now without armored support and taking fire from multiple American positions, withdrew in disorder back into the fog. Staff Sergeant William Porter, observing from the command post 50 meters behind the forward positions, immediately radioed the engagement results to battalion headquarters. 2 Panzer IVs destroyed at 150 and 175 yards, frontal and side hits, complete penetration both targets. Bazookas performed as trained. Germans appeared shocked at our effective range. Similar reports flooded into American command posts across the Ardennes sector during December 18th and 19th. At Naval, bazooka teams from the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment destroyed 4 German tanks at ranges exceeding 100 yards. Near St. Vith, infantry from the 7th Armored Division engaged Panther tanks at distances German doctrine had assured their crews were safe from American rocket launchers. The German response revealed complete unpreparedness. Radio intercepts by American signals intelligence units documented frantic communications requesting clarification about American anti-tank capabilities. One intercepted message from a Panzer Battalion commander stated, "Request immediate intelligence update. American rocket weapons engaging at ranges exceeding known capabilities. Multiple tanks lost beyond assessed threat distance." Panzer Grenadier units, trained to maintain 75 to 100 meter screening distances, found their tactical doctrine suddenly obsolete. American bazooka teams could engage German armor before infantry escorts reached positions to suppress them. The comfortable security German tank commanders had felt operating at what they believed were safe standoff distances evaporated within hours of the offensive start. By December 20th, German tactical reports documented a fundamental shift in armored operations. Tanks that had advanced confidently along roads now sought cover, moved more cautiously, and required substantially more infantry support at greater distances from the vehicles. The psychological impact matched the physical destruction. German armor had lost its aura of invincibility. Wehrmacht intelligence officers reviewing after-action reports from the Ardennes finally recognized their catastrophic miscalculation. American rocket launchers were not the limited weapons described in 18-month-old intelligence assessments. The M9A1 firing M6A3 ammunition represented a quantum leap in capability that German intelligence had completely failed to detect.
June 19, 1944, 10:30 hours. The Philippine Sea, west of the Mariana Islands. Vice Admiral Gisaburo Ozawa, commanded the Japanese mobile fleet from the carrier Taiho. His force included 9 carriers, 5 fleet carriers, and 4 light carriers. It represented the largest concentration of Japanese naval aviation power since Midway, 2 years earlier. Ozawa knew the odds. American signals intelligence had provided Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the U.S. Fifth Fleet, with detailed information about Japanese strength and intentions. Spruance commanded Task Force 58, now expanded to 15 carriers, 7 Essex-Class fleet carriers, 8 light carriers of the Independence class. The numerical disparity was staggering. Ozawa's 9 carriers embarked approximately 430 aircraft, many flown by pilots with minimal training due to Japan's inability to replace experienced aviators lost in 2 years of attrition. Spruance's 15 carriers carried over 900 aircraft, flown by well-trained pilots with hundreds of hours of flight time. Lieutenant Commander Zenji Abe, serving as Air Operations Officer aboard Taiho, documented in his diary the morning of June 19th. "We face impossible odds. Our intelligence confirms 7 American Essex-Class carriers in the enemy formation, each carrying more aircraft than our largest carrier. Our pilots are brave but inexperienced. Many have fewer than 100 hours in their aircraft. American pilots have 300 hours or more. We attack because orders demand it, not because victory is possible." The Battle of the Philippine Sea began at 1000 hours when Japanese aircraft launched their first strike. Ozawa had planned to use land-based aircraft from Guam to supplement his carrier forces, but American strikes the previous day had destroyed most ground-based aircraft. His carriers would face Task Force 58 alone. American radar detected the incoming Japanese strike at 10:39 hours at a distance of 150 miles. Task Force 58's fighter director officers had 30 minutes to position defending fighters. The Essex-Class carriers launched Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighters in overwhelming numbers. Over 220 American fighters climbed to intercept. What followed was not a battle, but a slaughter. American pilots, many veterans with multiple combat missions, engaged Japanese formations flown by inexperienced aviators. The Japanese called it the Marianas Turkey Shoot. Between 1000 hours and 1500 hours, American fighters and anti-aircraft fire destroyed over 300 Japanese aircraft. American losses totaled 30 aircraft. Aboard USS Lexington CV-16, Lieutenant Commander Paul Bowie, commanding Fighter Squadron 16, logged the engagement. Enemy formations appeared disorganized. Pilots exhibited poor tactical coordination. Many appeared to be inexperienced, maintaining steady courses that made interception simple. Our squadron claimed 19 confirmed kills for 0 losses. Every carrier in the task force reported similar results. The mathematical destruction was systematic. Each Essex-Class carrier operated a fighter direction center with radar, radio communications, and trained controllers who vectored defending fighters to intercept incoming raids. The Japanese had nothing comparable. Their strikes flew toward targets without real-time information, unaware that American fighters were vectoring toward them with precise altitude and bearing information. By 1500 hours, Ozawa's carrier air groups had been effectively destroyed. Of 430 aircraft launched that morning, fewer than 100 returned. But the destruction was not complete. American submarines USS Albacore and USS Kavala had penetrated the Japanese screen. At 12:32 hours, USS Albacore fired 6 torpedoes at Taiho, Ozawa's flagship. 1 torpedo struck the carrier. Damage control teams initially believed the hit was survivable, but aviation fuel vapors from ruptured fuel lines accumulated throughout the ship. At 15:32 hours, the vapors ignited. Taiho exploded and sank, taking 1,650 men with her. At 12:20 hours, USS Kavala fired 4 torpedoes at carrier Shokaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and Santa Cruz. 3 torpedoes struck home. Shokaku's damage control capabilities, degraded by years of war and material shortages, proved inadequate. At 15:01 hours, she rolled over and sank. June 20, 1944. Admiral Spruance authorized a long-range strike against the retreating Japanese fleet. Task Force 58 launched 216 aircraft at 16:24 hours, knowing the strike force would return after dark, a dangerous operation that would test pilot skill and carrier operations. The strike found Ozawa's battered fleet at extreme range. American aircraft attacked at twilight, sinking carrier Hayo and damaging several other ships. The return flight became an ordeal. Aircraft ran out of fuel and ditched in the ocean. Carriers turned on searchlights to guide returning pilots, a violation of standard procedures that risked submarine attack but saved lives. Of 216 aircraft launched, 80 were lost, most to fuel exhaustion and nighttime landing accidents rather than combat. Rescue operations recovered most pilots, but American losses were immediately replaceable. Task Force 58 included 7 Essex-Class carriers, each carrying spare aircraft. Replacement planes could be flown aboard from escort carriers serving as aircraft transports. Japanese losses were irreplaceable. Of 9 carriers entering battle, 3 were sunk. Surviving carriers had lost most of their aircraft and pilots. Japanese naval aviation had been broken as an effective fighting force. The Battle of the Philippine Sea confirmed what Admiral Nagano had feared 18 months earlier. American industrial capacity had negated every Japanese tactical advantage. Captain Inoguchi, who survived the battle aboard carrier Zukaku, wrote in a report discovered post-war, "We faced not 15 carriers, but the full industrial might of America made manifest. Each carrier we damaged or destroyed was replaced within weeks. Each aircraft we shot down was replaced within days. Each pilot we killed was replaced by 2 more. We fought a factory, and factories cannot be defeated by courage."
October 25, 1944. Leyte Gulf, Philippines. The largest naval battle in history unfolded across 4 separate engagements spanning 3 days. The Imperial Japanese Navy committed nearly its entire remaining surface fleet in a desperate attempt to destroy American amphibious forces landing at Leyte. Facing them were 17 American carriers, 9 Essex-Class fleet carriers, and 8 Independence-Class light carriers. The battle demonstrated the complete transformation of naval warfare through industrial production. Admiral William Halsey's Third Fleet, built around Task Force 38, the redesignated Task Force 58, operated with such overwhelming strength that Japanese forces never achieved tactical coordination. American carrier aircraft ranged across the Philippine waters, attacking Japanese surface forces from multiple directions simultaneously. At Cape Engano, the northern action, Japanese Admiral Ozawa deliberately exposed his 4 remaining carriers as decoys to draw American carrier forces away from the main attack routes. The tactic succeeded tactorially, but failed strategically. American carrier aircraft from USS Essex, Lexington, Franklin, and Enterprise decimated Ozawa's carrier force, sinking all 4 carriers, Zuikaku, Zueho, Chitose, and Chiyoda. But the loss of 4 carriers that could barely operate aircraft no longer mattered to Japan's strategic position. What mattered was that Task Force 38 included 9 Essex-Class carriers, with more arriving monthly. Even as Ozawa's carriers sank, USS Shangri-La CV-38 was completing sea trials off Virginia, scheduled to join the fleet in January 1945. Lieutenant Commander Yoshio Shiga, one of the few surviving experienced Japanese naval aviators, was captured after Leyte Gulf. His interrogation report, preserved in Navy archives, revealed the psychological impact of facing industrial superiority. "We knew we could not win. Every battle we faced more American carriers. We sank 1, 2 more appeared. We damaged 3, 5 more replaced them. Fighting the Americans was like fighting the ocean, endless and inevitable." November 1944 marked the peak of Essex-Class operations. 11 Essex-Class carriers operated in the Western Pacific simultaneously, forming the core of the most powerful naval force ever assembled. Task groups could split into multiple formations, each containing 3 or 4 fleet carriers, more striking power than Japan's entire remaining naval aviation capability. The kamikaze tactics introduced in October 1944 represented Japan's acknowledgement that conventional naval combat could no longer succeed. Suicide attacks aimed to damage American carriers faster than shipyards could replace them. But even this desperate strategy faced the mathematics of American production. USS Franklin CV-13 suffered devastating kamikaze damage on March 19, 1945, near Kyushu. The attack killed 724 men and left the carrier ablaze with secondary explosions threatening to destroy the ship. Franklin survived and eventually returned to the United States for repair. But her absence from the fleet mattered little. By March 1945, 17 Essex-Class carriers operated in the Pacific, with more completing workups or transiting from the Atlantic. April 7, 1945. Operation Tengo, the final sortie of the Japanese battleship Yamato, demonstrated the complete obsolescence of surface warfare against carrier-based aviation. Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, sorted with minimal air cover toward Okinawa on a one-way suicide mission. Task Force 58 detected the force and launched strikes from multiple carriers. Nearly 400 aircraft from USS Hornet, Bennington, Bella Wood, San Jacinto, and other carriers attacked in coordinated waves. Yamato, designed to withstand battleship gunfire, had no defense against aerial torpedoes and bombs delivered by aircraft from 8 different carriers. She sank after absorbing at least 10 torpedo hits and multiple bomb strikes. The final accounting of Essex-Class production validated every fear Japanese admirals had harbored. Of 24 carriers ordered, 17 were commissioned before Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945. 7 more were completed after the war ended. The production timeline showed relentless acceleration. 1942, 1 carrier commissioned. 1943, 6 carriers commissioned. 1944, 7 carriers commissioned. 1945, 3 carriers commissioned before surrender, 4 more after. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet, summarized the strategic impact in his final report. The Essex-Class program provided numerical superiority that made defeat impossible. Japanese forces faced the reality that we could absorb losses they could not, attack on multiple axes simultaneously, and maintain continuous operations through ship rotation. Industrial capacity determined the war's outcome more than any tactical engagement. The final interrogation of Admiral Nagano, conducted by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, revealed the Japanese perspective. We knew we could not win. Every battle we faced more American carriers. We sank 1, 2 more appeared. We damaged 3, 5 more replaced them. Fighting the Americans was like fighting the ocean, endless and inevitable. The Japanese carrier Shinano, converted from a Yamato-class battleship hull, was sunk by submarine USS Archerfish on November 29, 1944, 10 days after commissioning. She represented Japan's inability to match American production. Shinano required 4 years to build and lasted 10 days. In the same period, American shipyards produced 17 Essex-Class carriers. The Essex-Class carriers that survived the war continued serving for decades. Several were modernized and served into the 1970s. USS Lexington CV-16 served as a training carrier until 1991, 49 years of service. These ships, built in months, served for generations. Today, USS Yorktown CV-10 and USS Intrepid CV-11 serve as museum ships, permanent testimony to the industrial mobilization that won the Pacific War. They represent not just warships, but the transformation of American industrial capacity into strategic dominance. The Japanese admirals who underestimated American shipbuilding capacity made a fatal error. They calculated what was probable rather than recognizing what was possible when an industrial democracy committed to total war. The 24 Essex-Class carriers proved that in modern warfare, production capacity matters more than tactical brilliance, industrial depth matters more than warrior spirit, and factories win wars that courage alone cannot win. The ships the Japanese admirals never expected became the instruments of their defeat.